You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Hello and welcome to the Colts Blue Zone podcast. I'm Matt Adams alongside Mike Chappell. Dave Griffiths is out yet again this week.
Where is he? Doesn't he work?
Vroom vroom again. Indianapolis 500 Media Day at the Motor Speedway. So Dave's got coverage responsibilities there for on air and online.
All right, I'll cut him a break.
And media days, you know, it's not your last chance to talk to the drivers, but one of the big days to talk to. Everybody's going to be there. You know, you can get some comments and stuff ahead of Carb Day on Friday as of this recording with no carbs. I feel like you should have a pasta company or something like that just steps in and sponsors that and changes the definition of Carb Day. But obviously, busy sports weekend ahead. You've got the Fever in action on Friday, not in town, but they're on the road in L.A. Looking for their first win still. The Pacers will play in the Eastern Conference Finals. They will play tonight, and then they'll play again on Saturday. And then the Colts have started organized team activity practices. So there's quite a bit to talk about coming out of that. We've got some joint practices. We did have a little bit of an injury scare with Michael Pittman Jr. we'll talk about. I'll also talk about some of the comments that we heard from Coach Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson making his first comments from him that we've heard in a while. So a lot to talk about. So first we'll start off the show with Adonai Mitchell, still unsigned for the Colts, second round pick, 52nd overall. Colts have all their other draft picks under contract. We were expecting that Mitchell would have been signed by now. I don't think it's a sign of any sort of malcontent or anything like that. It's just there's a little bit, and I mean little bit, of wiggle room when it comes to guaranteed money in some of these rookie contracts. So they're probably trying to figure out signing bonus versus what's worked into the deal, and I don't think it's a major issue right now.
No, again, it's that rookie wage scale. These players are slotted. I don't have the numbers. He's going to get a 4-year deal worth whatever, and a signing bonus of whatever. And normally with these, there is some wiggle room on how much of the contract you want to guarantee. With second round picks, normally the first year's guaranteed. Obviously, the signing bonus is, but how much in year 2 and 3 do you guarantee and all that? So this will get done. Last year, went back and looked. Anthony Richardson and I think Blake Freeland got done like right before training camp. But with the first round pick, you can have issues with how do you want to pay the big signing bonus. You want to all at once, or it'll get done. I'm old enough to remember when Edgerrin James missed all of training camp, and Marshall Faulk missed a lot, and Bob Sanders missed a lot. This will get done. But the most important thing is he's participating in OTAs.
He was in OTAs. He was at rookie minicamp. So
he's getting the work in.
Yeah, he's doing what he's not missing windows of opportunities with the team to try to build some chemistry with the quarterback and the receiving core, and missing out on some of that experience in coaching. You know, because one of the things, and we'll get to him a little bit later, but one of the things JuJu Brents talked about is that he's had a full offseason this year to get acclimated to the game, whereas last year, coming off of wrist surgery, you know, he was just like, I'm staring at a playbook and I'm not really. You know, you're trying to engage, but you can't really be out there, and it's a lot different. So it's good to have Mitchell out there.
When you look back at JuJu, he didn't practice. I mean, he didn't practice to get up to speed with the defense. He misses all the OTAs and off-season work because of the wrist. And then he had something coming out of training camp, whether it was a hip or a hamstring or a quad, I don't remember. But when he started being available, they were into the season. And when you get in game mode, you don't have much time to say, okay, now we're going to let JuJu get up to speed on this. No, you're going full speed. So this is a very valuable time for him. We know how important he is to that secondary. He's the one. Yes, Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore's the guy. Mm-hmm. But you need the outside guys. And, you know, in OTAs, it was JuJu on the right side, and it will probably be Jalen Jones or perhaps Dallas Flowers, who's coming back from that Achilles he tore. So it's encouraging that he's out there already. So, yeah, it's, again, practice. And we'll get to it, but Jonathan Taylor is out there. I think, we've mentioned that he and Richardson were on the field for 2 plays in games, 2. And they could have only practiced 2 or 3 times leading up to that Tennessee game. Remember that JT missed everything with, whether you want to call it a contract, whether you want to call it prolonged rehab, whatever. It doesn't matter. So, practice, Allen Iverson, practice. It is important to some degree, and these guys out there, it's very, very invaluable.
All right, so organized team activities. I always want to call them off-season team activities. I caught myself this time, but it's organized team activities, practices for the team this week. Starting, they had their first practice on Tuesday.
It's 11 on 11 for the first time.
Right. And they had their first on Tuesday. They practiced yesterday, and there was a media availability. We got to hear from Coach Steichen and some of the players. They will have another practice today, and then they'll be back at it next week as well, May 29th, 30th, and 31st. Then a mandatory minicamp will follow that in June, the 4th through the 6th, and then that is kind of it until training camp from the team. And as Mike was saying before the show, once they end minicamp there in June, you don't want to hear anything else from the team, because if it is, it's probably not great news.
It's either a guy working on a community effort, or he's got a football camp, or the coach gets a call late at night that we've detained your player because of whatever. So yeah, off season, or that's the true off season, is the middle of June to the middle of July. It's the only real dark period for the NFL calendar, and you really don't want to be writing about players.
No, absolutely not. And we knew that the team would have joint practices against the Arizona Cardinals. We'd reported that last week, I think, but they talked about that, officially announced that today. So they'll have a pair of practices against the Cardinals ahead of their August the 17th preseason game. That's at home. And then also found out, and I think that you had mentioned that they were going to do a second practice as well. They were working on it, and it will be against the Cincinnati Bengals. It'll mirror very much last year what they did with the Philadelphia Eagles. They'll have a joint practice before their prime time preseason game that week.
That game's on a Thursday. They'll do the scrimmage on Tuesday. And again, I don't know how much Anthony Richardson needs to play or will play in preseason games. These scrimmages are huge. He played 4 games. 4 games. So he still hasn't seen everything he needs to see from opposing defenses. So everything he gets to see that's different is great. And one thing to remember with Arizona, we'll have Marv.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Marv Jr.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Marv Sr. shows up.
You think they'll try to work a trade?
They'll try. It'll be one of those where Arizona will get on the bus after the second practice, and they'll say, "Well, where's Marv? Where's Marv Jr.?" And the Colts will have absconded him and put him in duct tape in a room. But it's one of those where it was always great to say, "What if?" And it was never ever going to happen. But we'll get a chance to see Marv Jr. and marvel at what he looks like out there.
Yeah, that is going to be really something extraordinary, I think, for him to be in the league and be up against the Colts there. It's the 4th year in a row, according to the Colts, that they have hosted a team for joint practices. I thought that they had done that more often, but they must have had a gap year probably.
Because they've done this a lot.
Yeah.
I got the list I didn't bring with them, but yeah, and again, it's normally at Grand Park, whether it's Cleveland or Detroit or Chicago or whomever, and they're spirited because you're tired of beating on your own guys, yep. So now you can go after other guys. So and they've had some away back in the day that with Peyton they went to Nashville and scrimmaged with the Titans. They did Cleveland one year again with Peyton and Tim Couch. But it's always great to have it here, just because again I've always said training camp. I hope the Colts never going away for training camp, because it's 3 or 4 weeks that you get work done, but there's such an outreach with your fan base. And I really think so many of the people that go to training camp aren't season ticket holders because they just can't afford it. But boy, that time where you can watch practice and then after practice players come up and spend time and sign autographs. So I hope the Colts realize the value of going out to training camp. It's not like they're going to Wisconsin, but to kind of interact and connect with the fan base is invaluable.
So was it the COVID year where they just had to do camp at the football center, and it just was kind of a downer for fans.
And there's been talk that boy, if they could just have training camp at the complex, which they've thought about, but I don't know how they would have fans. It's just not conducive.
Yeah, it doesn't really. Yeah, it's just
there's no place for 3,000 fans really, and parking would be awful. So this is really great. It's, I live on the south side, and it takes me 35 minutes to get to Grand Park, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it's an ideal situation. I hope they realize that. I hope they never find a reason to not do it.
Well, and they've really, I think, liked being up at Grand Park the last few years, and we'll learn it. I should have checked last year to see when they announced training camp, but it shouldn't be too long before they kind of say what their schedule is going to be.
I think they're going to report that last Tuesday in July.
Okay,
I
that
think
makes sense.
whatever that date is, and then you're going, and then you're going, and you get into the preseason schedule very quick. It's just amazing. I've done this for so long. It's amazing how quickly the calendar flips. I mean, it's like we're just walking out of Lucas Oil when they get beat by Houston, in the last game of the season, and here we are, not that far away from training camp again. So, and from dealing with Richardson's injuries and JT and all that, this has been a very, very, knock on wood, quiet, uneventful off season. And I would argue that of all the seemingly competitive teams that you expect to compete for something, these guys might be more under the radar than anybody. No one's really talking about the over-under on Vegas for wins is 8.5 or whatever. So there's just not a lot of buzz around this team, which probably is not a bad thing.
I never mind it when my team is under the radar because once you have expectations, some teams meet those expectations. Sometimes they're able to rise to the occasion, but other times, especially when you've got young teams, it is really, really hard to measure up. And we've seen that happen before with some of these Colts teams and stuff. So,
but I do think expectations should be there internally.
Internally, absolutely.
And with 100%. The fan base, I'm fine with that. I think that's because when you don't expect anything, then what are you doing? That's another step towards apathy, which you never want. So I think it's this team should have, at the very least, AFC South expectations. They should. They just should. It's not there nationally, and you see some of these teams that with Pittsburgh with their quarterback situation and all the young quarterbacks across the league from the draft. There are expectations. Chicago, holy smokes, there's a lot there. So we've been around a Colts team that had monster expectations, and for whatever reason they just didn't. After the 2014 AFC Championship game, they just didn't handle things well. So I like where they are. I like this team, but it all comes down to Richardson. It does.
I just don't need 16 ESPN experts telling me that the Colts are going to win the AFC South.
Right. Well, that won't happen.
Because those 16 different ESPN experts said it was Nixon 6 and Nixon 7, and they were all wrong, as the Pacers Twitter account pointed out after Game 7
Boy,
last
it was
week.
so hard to watch ESPN's pregame with those idiots.
What an embarrassment. What an embarrassment.
I realize it's information / entertainment, but have some objectivity. This is a rabbit hole we're going down. Have some objectivity. And don't, the one thing that I don't like about media nowadays is they're asking or demanding that the reporters be part of the show.
Yeah, you got to have takes. You got to try to get headlines.
I've never bought into that, and I understand you've got to have opinions, and that's fine. But I just think I just saw that Ed Werder, longtime ESPN guy, is no longer with ESPN, whether his contract expired, whatever, I don't know. But he's one of those guys that is very good at his job, and he's very understated. Mm-hmm. And that's not what today is.
No,
today
that's not what they want.
Is yell, it's bang on the table, and look at me, and that's something I'll never warm up to.
And listen, just to go back to it, and then we'll move on to actual Colts talk during this Colts podcast. But I understand where the Indiana Pacers are in the pecking order of the NBA. I understand where the market is.
Game, holy smokes!
But just the embarrassment of what happened in the New York broadcast before that Game 7, and then they had the Celtics. They had their foot on the throat of the Celtics and then just decided, you know what, maybe not.
I thought I saw that ESPN had it was with 10 seconds to play and a 3-point lead in the ball, you had a 97% chance.
Yeah, exactly. Saw the same thing.
And there was however many it's been, 150 or whatever consecutive games where that team has won. So we're talking 33-0, blowing that.
Exactly.
And we're talking, giving up a 4th and 30 against Houston or whatever it was. So
the most improbable of improbable. And it's great when it happens to your team, like when your team's the one who defies the odds. But, man, is it a gut punch when you're on the other side of it.
Well, and they had to steal a game in Boston. They have to steal a game in Boston.
And it was there. And
there
it was right there. And they simple things. Can't dribble and then, can't inbound the basketball.
Inbound the ball, they're going to foul you, and you hit free throw, and the game's over.
Absolutely. Oh, well. The Pacers will give another shot tonight, so we'll see how they respond in game two.
I mean,
I will say this for the Pacers. They have been really resilient, even in games where they have gotten absolutely clobbered. They've been resilient this season. You know, they'll go and they'll lose by 20 or 30 points, and then they come back and they beat the Knicks to win the series. And it seems like it's not a team that loses a lot of consecutive games. They rebound pretty well. So I'm hoping I'll see a good effort tonight from the Pacers.
I'm nervous. If I had to bet, I would bet on Boston by a comfortable margin.
You think it's a comfortable margin?
Yeah, I just do, and I hope I'm wrong. You know, it's like when it was 12-0, game one started. You think, oh man, if it starts 12-0 this game,
I think they may not be able to come.
I think it gets out of hand. I hope I'm wrong, and it's just when you came so close. I think it's always history's shown like game one's where you steal a game.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference
in a series. So we'll see. God, they're fun to watch. They are just fun to watch, and you just hope they find a way to kind of. I keep thinking this is going to be an over in 5, but I hope they prove me wrong.
Yeah, we'll just have to. It'll tell us what kind of team, how strong they are as a team, if they're able to kind of shrug off what happened in game one. But if that shows signs of lingering in game two, then it may be, unfortunately, a short series. All right, now back to football. The actual purpose of this podcast, going back to OTAs, we did have a little bit of an incident with Michael Pittman Jr. Mike, tell me a little bit about what you saw, because it happened during the open portion of that OTA.
Yeah, it's just, they're just running plays with receivers on DBs, and Richardson rolls out to his right and throws into a crowd. It's probably not a great decision, but you throw to Pittman because Pittman's going to catch it. Goes up among a bunch of DBs and comes down awkwardly and doesn't get up. I mean, I'm talking, 2 or 3 minutes where he's down. And that's players generally get up when they can get up. And Chris Ballard was over there, and then Shane Steichen, who was behind the team down the field, walks over to see and then walks back. And finally Pitt got up. And again, when the trainer showed up, it looked like they were looking at his left knee. And he finally got up, and then there was a noticeable limp, and then they took him inside. But Shane Steichen said, did he just bump knees, and no immediate update, but he should be fine. And I got some confirmation that it was just bumping knees, and I'm sure there was that initial scare with the player that, oh my gosh, what did I do? But apparently everything's okay. Now, whether he's out there today, whether we see him next week, I don't know. He needs practice with AR as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, they got good work last year during the off season, but he needs work with it. It's just that thing where, again, if this is OTAs are non-contact. You don't hit people, but this wasn't hitting people. It was just kind of what happens in practice when guys are going for the ball. But what all these years I've done this during, whether it's practice or training camp, and this really sounds terrible, but it's true. When someone goes down and you can't really see who it is, the first thing I do is I start looking at numbers. So back in the day, I'm looking at 18, I'm looking at 32, I'm looking at 88, 87, 93, 98, because there's some guys you just have to avoid getting hurt. And with Pitt, again, he's their guy. He's one of their top 5 players on the team. And he's got to carry the load offensively. And, oh, by the way, they just gave him 3 years, $70 million. So it's really encouraging that he got up and walked off, and then they're saying that it was just bump. And anyone who's bumped knees or you bumped elbows.
Not a pleasant experience.
It's not. And you think, oh, man, what did I do? Well, it's just you hit your crazy bone. Well, that's not what this is. But hopefully he's okay. I mean, with Pitt, the big thing is he's the guy. He's one of their top couple of offensive players. And what he can do, what he can add, not add, but what they've added offensively around him with you got JT and you got Pitt and you got Downs and you got Pierce and you got Adonai Mitchell. And the tight ends, we'll see how that thing plays out. But it's got the potential to be a really good offense. And we've talked before, Shane Steichen and Jim Bob did incredible things with the talent they had to be a top 10 scoring team. What can they do when they have all these guys back?
We'll get right into that a little bit. Shane Steichen did, have some of that muted enthusiasm that you hear from him a little bit, and he seems to think, and just going back schematically to what they did with Gardner Minshew and really having a lot of questions about that receiving core and really having your playmaking tight end Jelani Woods being out, and the Colts still in that top 10 in scoring, they were still able to manufacture explosive plays. But now you've got your quarterback that you're expecting to make explosive plays. Jelani Woods is back. You're going to add Ashton Doolin to the mix. Mitchell, like you said as well. You've got a healthy JT coming in and from the ground floor working with your new quarterback. I think Steichen's pretty excited about this, and I think that means fans should be excited as well.
This is going to be a team probably that goes as far as the offense takes it. The defense has that. You really like some of the parts on defense with Latu and some of these younger guys growing and getting better. But this is going to be an offense-driven team. It is. That's why I wouldn't have been shocked if they found a way to move up and get a receiver, a top end receiver, or Brock Bowers. But just with what they've got coming back, I think when you're around Steichen enough, you sort of kind of read body language and read what he's not saying. Mm-hmm. He's really excited about this group. I think they believe that with Richardson that there is another level to Pittman's game. I asked Reggie Wayne that. I said, is there another level? He said, there better be. We just paid him a load of money. And that should be. The one thing that's been missing from Pitt's game is the deep threat. He's had a couple of catch and runs. And then with Alec Pierce, I still believe that he was held back as much as anybody last year by limitations at quarterback. That shouldn't be the case now. One of the big things that Richardson brings is outside the pocket, either by design or when a play breaks down, and that's a defensive back's worst nightmare, is a quarterback outside the pocket. And these guys have got guys, Josh Downs underneath, Mitchell or Pierce deep. So on paper, it looks pretty good, and we'll see if it can all come together. What we all have to remember is Richardson's played 4 games. 4. And this is a quarterback that had a very, very limited college career. So
right, and they weren't even 4 whole games.
He played 3. He played what amounted to 3 games. 4 starts, 3 games, because he missed 2 halves of games. But you like what you saw. You wish you had seen more. But, again, I think that the signs are very encouraging. We'll just see if it comes together.
And we'll talk about AR in depth here because he talked to the media yesterday. But before we get into what Steichen said about AR, I wanted to mention a couple things that I caught from Steichen. Seemed to be very impressed with Jalen Carlies, the safety that they drafted out of Missouri, who they're converting to linebacker. We have talked about his long wingspan and his vertical, and I guess he made a nice snag in practice yesterday.
Similar to when Shaq Leonard in training camp, one of the first plays he picked off Andrew Luck.
Yeah, and Steichen said AR, and even Steichen, who's a pretty tall guy and used to play quarterback in college, said he has trouble getting the ball over Carlies. So right. That's an interesting, because that's kind of an interesting mold there that you would have, because that's very reminiscent of Shaq Leonard there, having that wingspan, that verticality, being able to do that. Also, he talked about Jelani Woods. It says it's very nice having this guy back. He's a playmaker. He had some limited experience with him last year in training camp, but then it was the one hamstring, and then it was the other, and this injury that we thought would, maybe take a few weeks to work out or maybe a month,
right.
Just lingered the entire season. They were not able at all to have Jelani Woods, and I guess he's in his, 3rd season coming up here?
Right.
So that is, if you're wondering why maybe the Colts didn't make a move at tight end or whatever, it's because they have a feeling this guy's going to have a pretty good year for him. And then Daniel Scott, who we mentioned earlier, sidelined by an injury all season last year that he suffered. I can't remember if it was before training camp or
it was during the offseason work.
During the offseason work. And so they were very high on him last year.
Ballard has always mentioned Daniel Scott when he's talking about the defense over the secondary.
Yes, and he has mentioned him a couple of times just in the offseason stuff about having him back this year. Steichen mentioned him yesterday. He had an interception, I guess, that was a nice play off of Richardson yesterday. So just a couple of those names that sort of popped when Steichen spoke. But really the main feature for everybody was getting about 10 minutes from Anthony Richardson yesterday, talking about his rehab, talking about his off-season work and how he's able to prepare with a full off-season this year and have everything kind of slow down for him, where, yes, last year was a whirlwind. You get drafted, you come to the team, you settle in, you're finding a place to live, you're settling into this new life, and he's been able to kind of slow that stuff down and just feels like he's in a pretty good place right now.
And happy birthday.
Happy birthday, 22, all of 22 years.
It's amazing to think how young he is, and he shows up wearing Tyrese Halliburton's jersey.
That old 24-year-old Tyrese Halliburton.
Right. And it's funny because we were talking about one of the things that came up, and it was really interesting and funny, is what's been his impression of Joe Flacco.
That was good.
And it was really good stuff. He said, I was in elementary school when he was playing in the NFL, because Flacco's 39. And he said, when I'm riding the school bus and Joe Flacco's winning a Super Bowl. So we've talked way earlier when Flacco was first brought in. Joe Flacco does not consider himself a mentor. He's a quarterback. He's not a quarterback coach. He's not a mentor, but just he will be more than willing to help Richardson wherever, in meetings. AR said, we're sitting there and Flacco will just say, well, I would do this, because that's how I am. And AR said, well, I'll be putting that in my bag.
Say, listen to it, soak it up, but also know that when you're out there on the field, Flacco's going to be doing the best that he can.
Right. So, and that's the way to do it. I mean, it's ideally Flacco plays only in mop-up time, good or bad. Mm-hmm. But it's so great to have him here. 17 years and all the yards and Super Bowl MVP and what he did in Cleveland last year, which AR said he watched. How could you not? He is very clear that he keeps track of all quarterbacks mm-hmm. and how they do. So it'll be a great situation. And again, it's not going to be that Flacco is going to be standing up by the board pointing out things when they're going over things in meetings. But if I'm AR, and I think he will, he'll be sitting next to Flacco, and he'll be popping with questions, and Flacco will help him however he can. It's just going to be one by, osmosis? It's just going to be by being close to the guy and soaking it up, as opposed to Flacco sort of teaching by things. It'll be, watch what I do and listen to what I say. That's how you get better in this tandem.
And it's interesting, they had kind of the dynamic with Minshew and Richardson was, kind of Minshew's being brought in. He's going to compete for the starting job, but really we think it's going to be AR's. But he's still got a lot of help from, Minshew kind of getting it adjusted and all that stuff. And then now he's got Flacco, who's just an encyclopedia of football knowledge. You really can't do any better from that.
Right. And again, when Richardson gets hurt, initially I'm sure there wasn't a lot of, well, I'll still stay connected to the team. There had to be such an early part of where he's just down and frustrated. But then even when you're hurt, you get the surgery, and then you're not really around that much to learn while you're doing it, while Minshew's doing this. And so this is such a great offseason for him. Now, again, Richardson had offseason last year. He did. But to have all these parts, and again, to have JT as being a big part, a total part of what they're doing is important. He just needs to see things that again, we can't harp too much on the fact that he played 4 games. And yes, there was preseason and the scrimmages, but he needs to see things. I asked Steichen, we looked at completions. Was the ball, was it a high pass or whatever? And I said, what do you look for in his development? He said accelerated vision. And that's, when the ball snapped, do you see things quickly? Do you see coverages and guys making adjustments? And he's seeing that, and that's where we're going to see. That's where we probably won't see with our eyes the improvement, but Steichen will see it by how Richardson reacts to what he sees during practice on
the
plays.
ability to read and process stuff quickly. Is that missing piece for every quarterback who gets drafted and goes from college to pro. And it doesn't matter whether you play in the SEC or wherever, the speed is just different in this league.
And it's the old saying that paralysis by analysis. If you're a quarterback and you hesitate a half a second,
it's over.
It's over. The window's gone, and so many times I've just seen it. Maybe that was Bryce Young last year. I don't know. But quarterbacks, all these guys have the talent. They can throw a ball through the eye of a needle and all that. But if you can't process quickly, it's hard to play the game. It just is. It goes with all positions, but especially quarterback.
And, of course, coming off that injury from, October the 8th against the Titans, he had the surgery on the 24th. I think. Sprained AC joint in his throwing shoulder, which is not exactly what you want to hear from your rookie quarterback, but these things do happen. Richardson said, that was a football play that happened. It was a running play. He just got tackled, basically, and just landed wrong.
We see quarterbacks go down every week. Not go down, get tackled like this, and they pop up and they play the next play.
Right.
This was just one of those fluky things.
Just kind of happened. He said basically, don't expect me to change how I play and how I approach the game. Although you will notice in some situationally playing a little bit smarter trying to play a little bit smarter.
And he pointed to we pointed out to him, and he confirmed the concussion at Houston.
Mm-hmm. Slowing down at the goal line.
We noted that the day it happened, and they sort of said, but yeah, he pulled up ever so slightly. And he gave the safety a chance to whack him. And if a safety has a chance to whack a player, they're going to do it.
And then he bowls him over, hits his head against the turf, concussion, then boom, you're out.
Misses a game and all that. So that's where you play smarter. The tackle by Harold Landry, he said I was trying to protect it or prepare myself for it, and it just hit wrong. And I said, well, you have to alter your style at all? He said, no. This is and again, the Colts won't. This is who they drafted. For people to think they're going to turn this guy into a pocket quarterback, it's not. And we see running quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, as much as he runs, I don't remember him getting hurt that much on runs because you can really, when you get outside the pocket, you can sort of protect yourself. Landry was just different because it was from behind and before he really had a chance to turn the corner. They drafted Richardson to be this guy and what he could be on the edge with Jonathan Taylor. So I think I remember with Edgerrin James, he said as a rookie I came in and I tried to get every yard out of every play. And then I realized after a year or two that if it's 3rd and 4 and you get 5, maybe that's enough on that play instead of taking an extra hit. So
getting 5.5 doesn't really help you at that point. It doesn't
matter. It just doesn't matter. And that's what you get from playing. I'm guessing at Florida that AR was always the best athlete on the field.
100%.
And he could slow up and wave at a guy because he could. You can't do that in the NFL. And he's mentioned, one of the big things that any player finds out early is the speed of the game. We go down another rabbit hole. Caitlin Clark, she's learning the speed of the game.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's there. You can talk about it, but until AR is out there and realizes he can't ease up even a half a hitch at Houston, that's what you find out by playing.
Yeah, because in most games in college, Caitlin Clark was the best player on the court. The problem now is every player that's on the court against her was also the best player on the court when they were in college.
And that's what Latu will find out. He probably went against 1 or 2 elite left tackles every week now.
Everybody's good. And
that's what you have to bring every week. But that's part of the process. That's why I keep coming back to the idea that Richardson needs practice. He needs to play. We're going to unfortunately see rookie ups and downs in year 2 because
he's essentially a rookie.
Right. 4 games is 4 games, and you can do all you want in OTAs and minicamp and even in training camp and scrimmages, but it's just different. You hit that last level when you play a game. It'll come to him.
Now, it sounded like from what I heard from him yesterday that he feels like as far as the arm goes that he's pretty much back full tilt.
He said it's been a couple of months when he can really wing it. the first few weeks and he said early on, he made it very clear that he's been like 2 weeks ahead of rehab the entire process. You start off throwing, and I'll say throwing, probably lobbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
20, 25
toss.
yards, and then 30 yards, and then he said he's really been cutting it loose, and we saw that. We saw that in the OTAs. And what was really interesting, though, is he said, I'll get up in the morning sometimes and I feel really good, and sometimes I get up and my shoulder's a little achy. That's probably just from the fact that he's, whatever it is, 6 or 7 months removed from surgery. And there's no limitations on what he does in OTAs. He'll take his normal reps, and then Joe Flacco will. But they will be very, very – they will monitor how the shoulder feels. And if he's overdoing it, which he will if they let him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got to manage these guys.
Right. The encouraging thing is there's no limitations, but they will monitor how he's feeling. And
he said probably right now he could throw about 60 yards. Is kind of what he can do. And I think we've known that his range can even be greater than that from what we had seen from him coming out of school.
He can throw it as far as he needs to throw it.
Yeah, absolutely. So sounds like pretty good news on the AR front there. He is an enjoyable guy to listen to. He's genuine when he's talking to the media. It's really pretty cool.
Some guys come in and you can see they're just a little bit out of water, out of their element. And some guys come in and you think, I go back to Edrin. I go back to Reggie. I go back to Antoine Bethea. The first day you saw him, you thought, man, this guy's ready. Gerard Powers, Peyton, of course. And this is what this guy is. He just, again, he's 22. It's just so hard to keep reminding yourself that he's 22.
22 years old.
Probably one of the youngest players on the team, including the draft picks. So there's so much room to grow. And all that we saw last year, the 4 games, he threw 84 passes last year. 84. That was 2 games for some of these quarterbacks the last few years.
Yes, absolutely.
So, again, the arrow's up. It's very encouraging. And and the draft just reaffirmed it when 6 quarterbacks went in the top 12. Mm-hmm. And they take Bo Nix in the top 12.
Yep.
I mean,
Denver, yep.
It just shows you that everybody realizes you have to have that guy.
So if you don't have that guy, then you really don't have a chance.
Again, I mentioned this last week. Is somebody asked me what Ballard's best draft pick was? They were talking this year. I said Richardson last year, because if he's not the guy, okay, you've got Joe Flacco, but you've got to have the Justin Herberts or Josh Allens or Joe Burrows or these guys, Mahomes, Jackson, because they, I go back to with Andrew Luck, he trailed 38-10 in the third quarter of a playoff game, and you won. He gives you Peyton Manning. They're down 21-6 at halftime against New England in the AFC Championship game. He gives you that possibility, and that's putting we're putting Richardson way ahead of what he's done. But that guy gives you the chance, and that's why there's so much local optimism. It's still nationally, there's just no buzz about Richardson. There just isn't. There should be, there isn't. But locally, after all that this fan base, I won't say the media because we don't matter. I mean, but all that the fan base has gone through since we sat in that media room at Lucas Oil and Andrew Luck saying, the cycle just wore me down and I've got to retire. Since then, we saw what happens when you don't have that guy. And fortunately, I think the Colts do have their guy. And so the next 4, 8, 10 years should be, you should be relevant at the very least.
Yeah, well, again, we'll have to see how things play out. You got a young player. It's not going to be perfect, and Richardson even said as much when he talked to the media yesterday. But what you hope for is that at the very least, you are out of the cycle of, hey, who's the quarterback going to be this year? And the Colts are out of that cycle, we think. And we'll know more once we hit the regular season.
One thing that was interesting, we had lunch with Shane Steichen on Monday. It was just sort of a casual bull session. But the one thing that has struck me about what he said about Richardson is the quarterback's a leader. He just is. He's got to be. And it's one thing to say, well, I'll be into the complex early and I'll stay late. But you got to know what you're doing when you're there early. Why'd you get there at 6 o'clock in the morning for breakfast? And he said from him being around the Quentin Nelsons and the DeForest Buckners, they get there early for a purpose, whether it's lifting, whether it's film study. And that's what Steichen sort of said that he's seen Richardson grow into, that you're there for a reason. This is your job now. You're
not just there early because it looks good to be there early.
No. You've got to have a purpose, and that's probably one of the big transitions from college to the pros. Colleges, to some level, you were doing classwork, varying degrees with varying players, but this is your job. And just because you got there at 6 o'clock, if you just got there at 6 o'clock for breakfast and a little else until everybody else got there, you're doing nothing. So he said just from being around these veteran players, he mentioned Quentin, he mentioned DeForest and all these guys, that's how you learn that this guy gets it, he understands, and that's a leader, and that's what they need this guy to be.
Yeah. So Anthony Richardson also saying that he and Steichen are just kind of constantly back and forth, texting each other like, hey, you want to try this? Do you want to install this? Here's my idea for how we approach this thing. Both ways. I mean, because, yeah, of course the coach is going to suggest stuff, but then you've got your quarterback also making recommendations. So, this guy knows his playbook now, and they're going to be constantly adding to it. So it should be encouraging. We'll have to see again how it plays out in the field.
And then you've got it on here. One of the things that he mentioned, which we've talked about, is he said, I know I've got to stay healthy and available for the team.
Yep. The best availability, as we've always said.
And that's when we went talking more about the perhaps changing his style, no, but being smarter. So he realizes that. Should the fan base expect Richardson to play 17 games? I'd say no, because
it's not just relegated to Richardson. It's it's a quarterback thing in the NFL. We saw so many backups last year, some of them having to play significant time because of injuries.
Gardner Minshew.
To top line guys.
Right. So but he realizes that he needs to be out there the bulk of the time, and that's what a Joe Flacco's for. If Richardson misses a game because he banged his thumb or he has a concussion, he's going to get hit because that's what he plays. But say he misses 2 games. Well, that's what Joe Flacco's for, to come in and be probably a better backup than what Minshew was. And I don't mean to diminish Minshew at all. So much of what I say, it seems like I'm diminishing him, and I don't mean to, because he gave the Colts a chance last year. Flacco, what he did those was it 5 weeks, 6 weeks in Cleveland?
Just amazing stuff.
Was amazing stuff when he's coming off his couch. I'm sure he was staying in shape. So, but to have him here, it's going to be immensely important to this team. But you want your starter out there. The longer he plays, the better the chance of Richardson, the better the chances of this team really pushing Houston or maybe Jacksonville for the AFC South.
And that's kind of where we'll see once we get closer to the season where the predictions actually lie. But the early season predictions right now, it really sounds like people expect the Texans and the Jaguars to be in a dogfight for that number 1 spot, and the Colts and the Titans are just kind of there.
As I said, they're under the radar. And Tennessee's like, I don't know what the projection was. Is it 5.5 wins for them?
That sounds about right.
6.5 maybe. But, yeah, Houston and Jacksonville, no one expects Jacksonville to come out and step in it again like they did over the last 2 months, whatever it was. As I mentioned last week, I'm really curious to see what Jacksonville does with Trevor Lawrence. He's due for $55 million.
Say be a big payday because he's a top. If he's your guy, you got to pay him like he's the top quarterback.
Because if you don't, what's that say to him and to the team? So, and he's shown you a lot of good stuff. I've from talking to people I know in Jacksonville, it seems like there's a question how much he loves it, the game, how much of a leader is he really? He's got all the talent in the world, but does he really love it? And how do you tell? But if you think he's a guy, it's like what Dallas has done with Prescott. What are you doing? The longer you wait to give him a contract, the price just goes up. I mean, holy smokes. So, but we've also seen that if you invest in a guy who's not the guy, Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
I would even say Kyler Murray in Arizona. They had to do it because there wasn't a viable plan B.
Say what else you got. Sometimes, and that's a screwed up way to have to do it, but that's the way the teams have to approach things sometimes with quarterbacks.
And maybe Murray, he had the injury last year. Maybe he steps up and is that guy. But when you got the guy, you've got to pay him. We were talking, if Richardson's a guy, just imagine his payday in going into year 5, $60 million.
Probably you're starting your floor right now.
Right now, it's 55. Whoever the next quarterback is going to get 55. I think Joe Burrow's got the highest at 55, and then Goff with 53. So, but that's a great problem to have. We were talking, if he's the guy, then you got to pay Bernhard Raimann next year as your left tackle. Fine, do it. Wouldn't you rather pay your left tackle than pay guys minimum wage? Because you're just kind of bailing water there. So, again, Richardson needs to be the guy for so many reasons. And if he is, you maybe you grit your teeth, but you pay it because that's what you do, and you're set for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Well, it's a capital I and it's a capital F on that. If he is the guy. But if that is the case, I mean, you think of things, and it's a different type of quarterback, all that, but you think of things, Peyton Manning here just papered over a lot of the problems that you're going to have from a roster standpoint. Andrew Luck, kind of the same way when he was here as well.
I think Andrew Luck more so.
Probably more so because I cannot believe that rookie season that they got into where they were.
Right.
It made no sense. That team had no right to be where it was, and it was there mostly because Luck was a prodigious talent.
Right.
And but anyway, those guys paper over some of your deficiencies in the roster because of what they can do. And so, yes, you're going to pay this guy a lot of money, and you're not going to be able to get this, and you're not going to be able to get that. You can't afford everybody, but because this guy is so good, your hope is that some of those other deficiencies you kind of get covered up over.
Right, and he makes a number 4 receiver good enough to be a number 2 receiver.
Exactly.
Because that's what they do. And again, that's what the great quarterbacks do. That's what great athletes do. They make the people around them better. There's a lot of guys, and I've been around, I got a lot of guys who great talents, and they didn't lift the supporting cast because they were sort of in it for them. The great ones, Mahomes and Jackson, all these guys, they make everyone else better around them.
A couple other guys we heard from. Let's talk JT a little bit. What did you think of what JT had to say yesterday?
He's upbeat, and I'm telling you, from where he is now to where he was a year ago.
Just a complete 180, isn't it?
Unbelievable. First of all, his disposition's a lot better. Of course, I mean, why shouldn't it be?
He got paid.
He got paid,
and on a young team that's expecting to be pretty good.
And he's not coming off ankle surgery. It just wore everyone down last year on what was going on with him, or I guess what wasn't going on with him. It was. They made it very clear that it was I don't want to say minor. Yeah, it was a minor procedure on his ankle. It wasn't, reconstruction, and it took forever to heal. No off-season work. Training camp got to be a circus, and then we had him and Jim Irsay in Irsay's bus
going back and forth, and
it was just it wasn't toxic. It got close to that, but here we are now. We're removed from that. He's if he can approach 2021. I mean, holy smokes.
Holy cow.
And I don't know. We were talking again in the press room, what's going to be expectation for him. 1,400 yards rushing probably. Maybe what might be just as important is yards per attempt. Is he in that 5 range?
So if he can get in that 5 range, that's going to be great for the Colts.
And with Richardson and all that. So totally different. And again, the idea that finally he's got extended time to work with Richardson and with everyone else, the offensive line. Can you imagine if, again, he played, I think, 11 games last year. I thought he played 7 or 8 where he was really full go.
Yeah, full go, yeah.
Because the first game
first couple of games, they barely, they had some packages.
Well, the first game he played, he had 2 carries.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was 2 carries. And then late there was a little injury, and he got hurt in the Houston game late and still had a heck of a game. So the idea that you're getting back a league rushing champion who's still young, with all these, I think they still need to find a backup running back.
Of course.
But he was extremely upbeat, very encouraged, and very eager to see where this offense can go.
He said he looked forward to having ARs back. He also said he was going to mentor fellow Badger Tanner Bortolini there on the offensive line, make sure that he gets treated well by the rest of the offensive line, and also is happy about the continuity on that offensive line unit, because they can kind of, the more and more you get into the season, then they just sort of feel, you know that Quentin Nelson's going to peel back on this guy,
right,
and that's going to open up the lane for you if you go this way. And he knows he's going to know that offensive line, so he's excited about that. And then I thought this was interesting because he's an offensive guy, but he was pretty juiced about the defensive line and the addition of Latu, and he's not alone in that. A lot of guys mentioned Latu. He's their first round draft pick and all of that, but they seem to be genuinely pretty excited for this guy.
Well, as a running back, you're going to be in pass protection, and occasionally you're going to have number 97 bearing down on you. He said, yeah, quick, twitchy. And you notice that. You just do it. One of the more unfair drills in training camp is when they have, it's blitz pickup for the running backs. Now, it's normally linebackers. And those poor, the linebackers have a 10-yard head start. And it takes a lot for a running back to hold up. But so they pay attention. They do. And how do you not pay attention to the top draft picks? And it's funny, but I don't know why it is, but I've been struck by how, I'm not saying small, because Latu is 6'5", 256, 265, whatever it is, but he doesn't look like a big edge pass rusher. He of course he's bigger than Robert Mathis. And then we had Dayo come in yesterday. He's 6'5", 285, and he looks bigger. So it strikes me the maybe sleekness is what I'm looking at with Latu, and everyone's talked about the leverage, how low he gets, and the quickness, and this could not be a better situation to bring in Latu with a loaded defensive line. I've seen people project that he's going to start alongside or opposite Quiddy. I think he'll be third initially behind Samson Ebukam, similar to the way they brought Dwight along in 2002. This kid's going to play. He's going to make a difference. And the prop bet we need to have is sacks, over under maybe 9, 8. Let's say 8. And I wouldn't hesitate to take the over.
Hey, they spent their first round on him. They were elated to get this guy because of the way it was all offense before the Colts got him. They essentially got the first defensive player off the board.
They got their
guy.
They could have taken up corner.
They could have taken anybody else.
Right.
They won on the defensive side of the ball, and they said, this is the guy that we want. So you've got to feel pretty good about that. Speaking of Dayo Odeyingbo, he would be coming up on a contract this year, but he's not thinking about that.
He downplayed it. He knows. And I tell you, it's really, when they picked up Quiddy's fifth-year option, it really, it leaves Dayo as the guy. What do they do with him at the end of the season? And it's going to, because you've drafted Latu, and if Dayo, I would argue that Dayo's got a higher ceiling than Quiddy.
It feels like it, and it feels like we've seen Dayo make some more impactful plays,
right,
especially last season. A ton of growth. So we'll just have to see what happens there with Odeyingbo. And then we also heard from JuJu Brents yesterday. He seemed pretty upbeat about everything.
Because he's healthy.
He's healthy. Last year he was behind the 8 ball with the injury. He was coming off one when he got drafted. That affected his ability to do anything in the offseason program. And then, he got hurt training camp, got hurt in the season. And so just getting him up to speed was a challenge last year. That's not the case this year.
He needs to solidify that right corner. I wouldn't be surprised in base early if he's the right corner, maybe Kenny's left corner, and then they move Kenny inside when they go to sub, which is 60% of the time. But he was eager. He walked in the press room, and he's just a very impressive player with his length. And you don't really see that in Colts corners for the most part. So the arrow's totally up for him. And again, we talked earlier about how much he missed last year. He didn't really practice for his rookie season because of all the time missed. When he got back in there, they're playing. So he's what they want. He's got the length, and he's very aggressive at corner. So they need him to be the guy for the next however many years.
He said he'd been doing a lot of closely watching Kenny Moore and DeForest Buckner.
Good for him.
And if you're going to pick a couple of guys on defense to take a look at and kind of pattern stuff after,
this is how you do it.
Those are the two guys you want to pick. So really pretty exciting stuff. I know it's OTAs, no contact and all that stuff, but
except for Michael Pittman being contacted.
Except for Michael Pittman Jr., unfortunately. But boy, you can start kind of seeing things take shape here. We'll have some more OTA practices next week. We'll have that rookie mini camp. Then we'll have training camp.
Veterans mini camp.
I'm sorry, veterans. It's
right.
mandatory mini camp for the team.
Correct.
And then after that, we'll have training camp. And then before you know it, it'll be preseason, and we're going to be talking about that season opener against the Houston Texans on September the 8th.
It's amazing how quickly it goes. Then that's because the league, for the most part, always keeps itself in the picture. As we mentioned, the one downtime is mid-June to mid-July. And then once you get into training camp, it'll be 3.5 weeks in Grand Park. It'll be gone. And then you get into the season, and the weeks fly by. We'll have so much Indianapolis Colts stuff to talk about, especially once we get to training camp. And you can find all here on the Colts Blue Zone podcast. For Mike Chappell, I'm Matt Adams. Also for Dave Griffiths as well, our Indy 500 friend. Will he ever be back, or are we just going to be you and me?
Well, I think the race is this weekend. Depending upon
he'll find something to do next
Well,
Wednesday.
that's probably true. I mean, Dave could just be on assignment. Who knows? But for Dave Griffiths, Mike Chappell, I'm Matt Adams. Thanks for listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast.